Delighted. Next guest today, head of campaigns at Popular Conservatism. You try saying that. Andrew Allison, a very good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm all right. Ryan's quite a steadying influence in a sea of madness, and he says to me, this is what he does, I think Andrew would prefer to talk about quangos and the BBC than he would about the Iranian sex toy smugglers. So I obviously am going to ask you straight away about a country that says that an Iranian asylum seeker who's got an illicit sex toy smuggling business can stay in this country, Andrew Allison, because he would go skint if he went back to Iran, where those sorts of things are frowned upon. We are turning into a bloody laughingstock, aren't we, my friend?
Well, it is. It's a little bit like the McDonald's story, you know, where the child wouldn't eat McDonald's in Albania. Mind you, I don't think they even have McDonald's in Albania, so
Probably
I think
why they didn't want to go back.
There, wouldn't they, sir?
But you know, we make a joke about it, and I do it quite deliberately. But if you step back from that and you think, you can stay here, you can find yourself some warped left-wing lawyer who the taxpayer's going to pay for to argue the toss about something so wrong, and yet I go back to Andrew, there's people here who are really, really struggling, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. And these stories seem to be coming out every week, don't they? You seem to be commenting on it. Everyone in the media seems to be commenting on it. And the British people are getting more and more angry, genuinely angry about these sort of stories, and yet nothing ever gets done by government ministers.
Well, we'll keep talking about it here. Let's talk to you about a couple of things I know that are I can say close to your heart. How can the BBC be close to anybody's heart? I don't have a problem with this new man. Samir Shah, by the way, is the new chairman of the BBC. I have a problem that he decided to instigate a sort of internal sort of tribunal-ish report to look at what he calls unacceptable behaviour at work, or people running their mouths off, Mr Lineker maybe. But I don't like, it's like the Met Police I criticised when they do these internal inquiries. You shouldn't mark your own homework. When there are problems inside an organisation, I always believe it should be independent. Obviously the Hugh Edwards scandal was disgusting, a paedophile walking free and still getting his pension from the BBC. But the report has come back to Samir Shah. He says he's going to draw a line in the sand. He's told presenters today, after this, let me state it clearly, if you think you're too big a star or too important to live by the values of this organisation, not only are you wrong, but you will find out the consequences of such. Well, it's basically said, the report, Andrew, that a small number of BBC stars and managers behave unacceptably and bosses often fail to tackle them. I mean, that doesn't go far enough, does it, really? I mean, that probably happens in most businesses. But for me, it's not really, I could be wrong here, I'm on many occasions, it's not really about individuals. It's about an organisation that's supposed to be an independent state broadcaster that has an ideology and a belief and seems to push that onto people, although so many people now don't want it. That's how I see it.
We're going to be discussing quangos a little later in the interview, Jeremy,
yeah.
And I wish I had a tenner for every time a government minister has said we're going to have a bonfire of the quangos, and it never happens. I also wish I had a tenner for every time someone senior at the BBC says, well, lessons have been learned and we will make changes, because they never seem to. Everything to do with Hugh Edwards was completely wrong. He should not have been suspended on full pay. There must have been a clause in his contract somewhere that said if you bring the corporation into disrepute, then you're out on your ear for a while without pay. But no, they continue to pay it, and then they've tried to reclaim it back. There's obviously huge problems in the BBC, and I agree with you completely. What has been said by the new chairman is nowhere near far enough to solving the problems that there are.
Just looks to me like it's window dressing, and I think the whole organisation, don't get me wrong, I'll be 60 years ago, I remember when we got our first telly, it was about 8 or 9. The BBC was everything. It was drama, it was documentary, it was news-based. Yes, of course the rest of the world commercially has caught up, but there's that sort of belief nowadays, you know this from a commercial point of view, that you have to prove your worth for people to listen, to get the figures to say to advertisers. To me, the BBC doesn't have to make the effort that so many of the rest of us have to do to justify their existence, and alongside that has been allowed to grow this apathy, this ideology that I don't believe puts them in tune with the majority of people, and yet still they're getting 170-something pounds a year from most people who don't want to break the law, and I would never condone that. But to me it's just, It can't carry on like that. It's just not sustainable as a business model. And really, if you look at its figures, it isn't what it was.
No, it's not what it was. It's nowhere near what it was, not when I was growing up as a child. The BBC really is clinging on to an analog funding system in a digital world. It's holding on to the license fees, apron strings. Now, if the BBC is as good as the BBC likes to tell us it is, then it really wouldn't have a problem going out into the big, wide commercial world, would it?
And proving with its programmes that it was actually good enough to be picked. But it isn't, and it knows that.
But it isn't, and it isn't, and it isn't. And that is the problem with the BBC. And I cannot see that the licence fee will be around in about 20 years' time.
No,
I mean, I didn't think it was going to be around now, about 10 years ago, yet it's still there. And I think whilst we have a Labour government, it certainly will remain there. But not that the Conservatives are any better, because they've had an opportunity. They had an opportunity for nearly 14 years to try and solve some of the problems of the BBC and never really did anything about it.
But you have government after government that says it's going to do one thing and do the other. And here's on to the next part of our discussion, and this is something that really resonates with so many people. Again, I paint the picture of how difficult it is for so many in this country. Quangos, we'll get you to explain more, but hundreds of fat cat of public officials, bosses, whatever, were paid more than our Prime Minister last year, sparking calls for this government to speed up its promised bonfire of quangos. The Labour government, a bonfire of quangos, has got to be the biggest pile of rubbish I've ever heard. They love a quango, they love a report, they love a bleeding committee. It's like Jurgen, who runs GB Energy. He's got no office and no staff. He's on 200 grand a year and nobody quite knows what Jurgen at GB Energy does. And that all doesn't make sense, any of it, does it?
None of it makes sense. Labour has promised to get rid of some quangos, but has managed to create about a dozen and a half new ones since it came into power. We're talking about the salaries maybe of some of them. Yes, I mean, some of them it does seem high salaries, but it's not so much that I'm bothered about. It's why do they exist?
Yeah.
And how accountable are they to ministers? I mean, we had the story from the Sentencing Council a few weeks ago, where the Justice Secretary said, no, you cannot discriminate on grounds of ethnicity, etc. And the Sentencing Council said, well, thank you for your strongly worded letter, but we're going to ignore you.
So who do they think they are? If I was in charge, I'd just dissolve them straight away.
This is the problem. It proves that the government are not in charge until they said, well, we are going to legislate, which is fine. The government's realising that it does have some powers over these quangos, but it had to threaten to legislate.
But I would look at the reason these quangos are set up in the first place, and you know, you're the expert, but am I right or am I wrong to say that the reason so many government ministers and departments set up quangos is because they don't want to make a bloody decision about anything? So it's like kicking the can down the road and saying, oh, I'll get a report on it or a quango on it. And the quango spends 5 years talking complete crap, gets paid hundreds of thousands of pounds, and then comes back and says to the government, oh, you should be doing that, or you shouldn't be doing that. And then the next government's in and they ignore it. It's a waste of money, man.
Ministers love quangos for that very reason that you've just stated, Jeremy. It allows them to say, well, it's not our decision to make.
Yeah.
It's up to whichever quango it happens to be. But I mean, why some of them even exist, I do not know. I mean, what I picked out of this Taxpayers Alliance report that came out today is the Construction Industry Training Board. You'd think the Construction Industry Training Board was something that was paid for by the construction industry, but no, it's a quango. Its chief executive's paid £177,500. Now, I didn't know anything about it, so I went online, and it's just unveiled a business plan, and it's got 3 key pillars, and the first pillar is to inspire and enable diverse and skilled people into construction. And then it's saying it wants the construction industry to have the skills to meet current and future needs. Fine. But why is it a quango? Why do taxpayers have to pay for it? And then when you look at the sheer amount of quangos and the compliance costs for business, that runs into billions. Yeah, we've got hundreds of millions of pounds for taxpayers who are funding these things, but the compliance costs runs into billions for business. And then, as I said earlier on in the interview, you've got the accountability argument here. Ministers should be making decisions, because we can kick ministers out of office through general elections. We can't kick quango quats Kratz, even. Easy for me to say. Quango Kratz. Out of either, can we?
Oh, do you know what? That's going to be forever. Quango, yeah. No, mate, I agree with you. And I think the ideology, we've got to move on, is that actually it's because ministers don't want to make decisions. They want to blame somebody else and they give too much power and it costs too much money. And I go back to something I keep saying, and I know I repeat myself, Andrew, and it's great to have you on again. It's about priorities. They prioritise not making a decision by pushing it onto somebody else. They prioritise allowing illegal migrants to stay in this country for fear of upsetting people. And they make their own people, sorry whether people like this or not, back of the queue. And resentment is building. And I'm not the person who's going to sit here and say we should do this, we should do that. Everybody has their own feelings, but one gets the feeling that there is a groundswell of increasing annoyance amongst tax-paying, law-abiding people who have lived in this country all their lives, who feel like they're about 8th class in the line. I really believe that, pal. Would you agree with that, just to finish?
Well, yes. I mean, if a party promises X and voters vote for X, but they end up with Y, then they're going to get very annoyed. And that's basically what has happened. It's happened with immigration, where we're going to bring immigration down to the tens of thousands, David Cameron said. That never happened. I mean, net immigration's running at the several hundreds of thousands. If politicians fail to deliver on their promises, then the voting public is going to get extremely annoyed, which is why it doesn't surprise me that Reform is doing particularly well in the polls. And of course, we've got a real poll coming up.
Well, we can't. I don't mean to jump in, but I have to be really careful because of those elections, yes. Andrew. You know that. I really appreciate you being on. Head of campaigns, Popular Conservatism, Andrew Allison. Always good to have you on.